The testing feature in BuildShip allows you to test your node logic and even your entire workflow's logic without needing to deploy the workflow. We all know that testing in production is a big no-no. I will cover two methods of testing your workflows. First, how you can test the individual nodes, and then how you can test all nodes in your workflow by testing the entire workflow. And we'll then end by showing you how you can debug your workflows and better understand why any nodes might be failing by using BuildShip's logging features. While you're building your workflows, you have the ability to test the individual nodes of your workflows. This essentially allows you to validate the functionality of your nodes without having to deploy your workflow and testing in production. Testing an individual node in BuildShip is dead simple. First, you just need to select the node that you want to test. We already saw an example of this in the early beginnings of this course where we tested our Perplexity AI node. There's two ways that you could start testing an individual node. As we've seen in the past videos, you can select the play icon, and this is one way of opening the test panel for this node. Another way is to access it through the node editor. To do that, you can click the code icon, and here you have the button at the far top right corner that says test node. And when you click test node, it will just run a test using the given inputs for the node. If the test is successful, you'll get back a successful response with the output of your node. In this case, we're using the Perplexity AI API to return the top 5 news for any topics we give it. And there's no limit to the number of nodes you can test. For example, one node in our workflow that we haven't tested up to this point is our send email node. We want to validate that this node's logic is working against the inputs we're specifying here. So we can select the play icon and we can test this node. We just need to fill in the inputs. As you can see, most of them are already populated. And we just need to specify an email message here. I'll just enter hello world. And let's test the send email node. And this is why it's important to test your nodes before you deploy your workflows to production. As you can see here, our test of the send email node is actually failing, and we're getting an error message here that our request has insufficient authentication scope. So let's try to re-authenticate with our Gmail account. We'll click this icon, and then this is the Gmail account that I'm currently signed in with. So what I'll do is log out from the selected account, and then I'll add an account. And this time I'll select a different Gmail account. And I just need to make sure that I select it. And it's now selected. And now for the sender email, I'll leave it as is, but I'll change the receiver email address. I'll enter this. Now let's test the node. I'll just change the receiver email here again. And let's test. Okay, this time it works. I'll just bring up my Gmail inbox to prove it to you that we actually got the email. So you can see this is the email, hello world, sent 0 minutes ago. Just like that, we've tested our send email node and verified that it's working as expected. We even showed you what it looks like when one of your tests failed. Beyond testing individual nodes, BuildShip also allows you to validate the functionality of your entire workflow. This includes any triggers you have connected, your logic nodes, and your output node. And we want to stress again that you can test your entire workflow before deploying it. We've been building this weekly news tracker workflow, and it's near completion. And while we've been testing the individual nodes in this workflow, such as the Perplexity AI node and the send email node, we've never tested our workflow's execution from start to end. And since we're talking about testing your entire BuildShip workflow, now is the perfect time for us to test that our weekly news tracker workflow is working from start to end. To test our workflow, we'll just use the familiar test button at the top right corner. This brings up the test panel. The crucial difference here is that we're now testing our flow instead of one of the individual nodes in our flow. And the first thing we'll need to do when we want to test our workflow is configure any inputs that our workflow expects. In this case, we only need to fill in the topics input. So here we have 2 topics already set for us, AGI, cursor, AI. Let's add a third one, open AI. And once we've configured our inputs, we can test our flow. And this will then step through and test each node in our workflow. So first, it tested the Perplexity AI chat node. If you see it's highlighted green, that means that the test for that individual node was successful. In fact, you can even click the play icon to preview the output of that test run for this node. If we scroll down, we can see that the then side of our branch was executed. This means that our condition where we're checking if we don't get back an empty response from the Perplexity AI API is true. So we can then send the report using the send email node. Now I'll go back to my email. You can see that we're getting back our Perplexity news report. It's not looking any good at the moment, but it's working. The reason it's looking like this is because it's returning the text in Markdown format. And that's how you can test your entire BuildShip workflow. The last thing we want to talk about is how you can debug your nodes and workflows with BuildShip's logging feature. Logging plays an important role in the development, debugging, and maintenance of your workflows. It's one of those features that you just can't live without because it allows you to track and understand the flow of your workflow and identify any potential issues. BuildShip has a built-in logging panel. You'll find this logging panel at the bottom. And here you'll find logs each time your workflow is executed or tested. By default, it's set to show you all the logs, but you can filter this to only show successful logs, or if you're debugging, only the failed logs. There's only green shown in our logs, so that means that we haven't had any failed execution of our BuildShip workflow. The cool part about logging in BuildShip is that if we expand a log, we'll see the full sequential execution of our BuildShip workflow. We can expand the log panel, and it all starts from top to bottom. So first we get a request. You can even preview the payload of the request. And next in our workflow are our inputs. We expand this, we can see the values that are passed to these inputs. In our previous test run, we entered AGI, Cursor AI, and OpenAI. And it then steps through each node in our workflow. And for each node, we can inspect and see the input that was passed to the node. And we can also preview the output the node returned. Next, it moved on to our branch node. The then side of the branch was executed. We can expand this. This is where we have our send email node. We can view the inputs that we passed, such as the email subject, the message, etc., and then the output. And then finally, it ends with the output node. This high-level overview of the sequential execution of the nodes in your workflow becomes very useful when you're debugging a failed node in your workflow. Let's see an example. Let's say that for some reason our Perplexity AI node is failing. And to show you an example of this, I'll cheat here and throw a made-up error in this node. So I'll bring up the code for the node. Since this is just JavaScript code, what we can do here is we can just throw a fake error. So I'll hit enter here and I'll say throw error. And then we can enter any made-up message. We'll say, haha, this is a fake error message. We'll click save. And now we'll test our flow. Make sure we have flow selected and we can test. So now our workflow is failing and we can expand the logs. We can refresh. We can see here that it's failing. We know that we manually triggered an error in the Perplexity AI chat node. So if we expand this, we can see that we get that error logged out. Error occurred, haha, this is a fake error message. One thing that you can do as well while you're building your workflows is manually add these logging messages throughout different steps of your workflow. There's two ways that you can do this. The easiest way to do this is to just use the logging node that BuildShip provides. So if you go to the BuildShip library and you can search log, you'll get this log message to console node. And any message you specify here will show up as a log in the log panel. The second way that you can log a message is inside of your node logic. As a matter of fact, this log message to console node is just a wrapper that's using BuildShip's logging functions. So here you can see that we're just doing logging.log, and which takes in the message that you want to log to the console. But you can also change this to error. I think that's all we're going to show for this video. So just as a recap, we went over how you can test the individual nodes in your workflow. We then showed you how you could test your entire flow. We explored BuildShip's logging panel. We looked at how you can inspect the execution for each node in your BuildShip workflow. We then looked at two ways of logging. The first by using the log message to console node. And then the second approach, which is logging inside of your node's logic. It's time that we continue working on our weekly news tracker. This workflow, believe it or not, is pretty close to complete. The main task that remains is for us to connect a trigger to our workflow. So in the next video, we'll talk about how you can connect multiple triggers to your BuildShip workflows, and we'll also explore the Connect tab.